Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. It was a rooftop birthday party. One of those curated, Instagrammable nights with string lights, overpriced cocktails, and people who talked like they were always recording themselves. Her friends were scattered across the patio, loud and radiant. And then there was me, holding her jacket like a valet, smiling on command. She laughed louder than usual that night. A little too loud. And when I leaned in to kiss her temple, she pulled away like it was a reflex. I let it slide. Until I didn't. Because the moment I knew everything had changed came wrapped in 7 words. Just 7. You're just convenient. Not exciting anymore. I wasn't supposed to hear it. She said it to her best friend, Alyssa. Whispered it like a joke. A cruel, effortless cut. And yet it landed louder than any scream. Alyssa glanced at me immediately after. I was standing 2 steps behind them, holding 2 drinks. Neither of them for me. Oh my God, she muttered, biting her lip. He's right there. But she didn't apologize. She didn't even flinch. She just smirked. Then maybe he shouldn't be listening. I placed the drinks on the table and walked away. No words. No scene. Just silence. But inside, something snapped. Not from anger, not even betrayal. From recognition. The realization that I was no longer part of her story. I was a placeholder. And placeholders get replaced. That night, she slid into the passenger seat of my car like nothing had happened. Talked about how cold the wind was. Scrolled through her phone the entire ride home. I drove in silence, replaying that sentence like a song you hate but can't stop hearing. You're just convenient. She didn't know I'd heard. She didn't need to. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing when the shift began. But from that moment forward, I started planning my exit. Not out of vengeance. Out of clarity. This wasn't going to be a fight. No screaming match. No door slamming. That would make her the main character again. No. I would leave like a whisper. Like a shadow. But she would feel it. And by the time she realized the silence meant something, it would already be permanent. It was 2 days later when I saw him. Not by accident. I knew where to look. Her workplace had a gallery opening, and she insisted I didn't need to come. It's just a quick event, all corporate. But I went anyway. Not inside. I watched from across the street, leaning against my car like any other stranger killing time. And there he was. Tall. Confident in a way that tried too hard. The kind of man who needed to be noticed. He placed a hand on her lower back as they stepped out for air. She didn't flinch. She didn't step away. That was all I needed. It was him. The one she whispered to in her phone when she thought I was asleep. The reason she suddenly needed to reconnect with herself and find space. He wasn't new. He was rehearsed. A week earlier, I might have confronted her. A week earlier, I might have cracked. But now I just watched. They shared a laugh. She tossed her head back like she used to with me. Like she was still the girl who wore red lipstick for midnight diners and told stories with her hands. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt nothing. Just inventory. Calculations. Because while they thought they were being discreet, Alyssa saw them too. She stepped out onto the balcony a few minutes later and locked eyes with me across the street. Her face changed. She knew, or at least suspected. That night, Alyssa sent me a message. No words. Just a screenshot. My wife. At dinner with him. A different outfit, a different night. Different intimacy. I stared at the photo long enough to memorize the angle of her smile. It was one she hadn't given me in months. I didn't respond to Alyssa. I didn't need an ally. I needed clarity. So I started collecting. Quietly. Bank transactions, rideshare histories, call logs she forgot to erase from the tablet we still shared. And like a puzzle, it all clicked into place. Weeks of overlapping narratives, fake meetings, unexplained errands, the gym bag that came home still folded. She wasn't careful. She was comfortable. Because she believed I wouldn't see it. That's the thing about being convenient. People assume you're blind. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And from that point on, I wasn't planning for survival. I was planning for precision. Quietly building the exit she would never see coming. Because she thought the silence meant defeat. She didn't realize it was a countdown. It's strange how quickly you stop looking for love and start looking for patterns. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I synced the iCloud account on our shared tablet. She never bothered to sign out. Messages, photos, backups, all synced. I didn't snoop. I documented. Screenshots. Time-stamped. No drama. No overreactions. Just the raw code of a decaying relationship. There was one message that stuck with me. Not the explicit ones, not the flirty emojis or blurred selfies. It was a line she wrote late one night. He doesn't ask questions anymore. It's like living with a shadow. I remember reading it twice, then smiling to myself. Exactly. I wasn't planning to use any of this against her. This wasn't about revenge. This was about clarity. About collecting the truth. Not for a confrontation, but for a clean exit. Like a surgeon prepping before an operation. Gloves on. No hesitation. She walked into the kitchen wrapped in a towel, asking if I'd seen her phone charger. I said no. She kissed me on the cheek and thanked me. I didn't flinch. I just filed that moment away. Her performance was seamless. But mine? Mine had become better. Because every word she said now felt like a rerun. Every touch, rehearsed. I knew what she was doing. Trying to keep me calm while she slipped further away. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't holding on anymore. I was letting go meticulously. That week, I stopped doing small things. No more reminders about the laundry. No texts to ask if she'd eaten. I didn't comment when she came home 2 hours late. I didn't ask about her day. I didn't even offer her a glass of wine when I poured one for myself. And still, she didn't notice. Because convenience doesn't speak. It functions. And when it stops functioning, it's just silence. She mistook my silence for detachment. But I was more engaged than I'd ever been. Not emotionally. Strategically. I downloaded copies of our joint documents. Backed up financial statements. Opened a separate account. Rerouted direct deposits. Changed the emergency contact on my medical file from her name to my brother's. Not out of spite. Out of preparation. Because while she was rehearsing a life without me, I was already living it. And she hadn't even noticed she was the only one still performing. It started with a weekend. I told her I'd be gone for a few days, no details. Just a flat, I'll be out of town. She didn't ask where, didn't even pretend to be curious. Just nodded, distracted by whatever was glowing on her phone screen. That silence was my permission. I turned off location tracking, disabled her access to our shared calendar, canceled the joint credit card, and replaced it with one in my name. Quiet edits to a life she thought she still understood. Then I disappeared. Not in the dramatic sense. I wasn't running. I was extracting. Systematically. My phone went silent. No updates. No check-ins. She texted once that Saturday afternoon. Everything okay? I didn't reply. She called that night. I watched the screen light up. Watched it fade. Sunday came. Another call. Then two. Then a string of messages. Still nothing from me. By Monday, the panic had a new tone. Not fear for my safety. She knew I was fine. She just couldn't prove it. Couldn't track it. Couldn't locate the man she had grown used to managing like an app. And now the app wasn't responding. She asked Alyssa if she'd heard from me. Alyssa lied and said no. I knew because Alyssa forwarded me the voicemail. Do you think he's mad? She asked, her voice tighter than she meant it to be. That was the first crack. Not because she missed me, but because she lost control of the narrative. For the first time in months, she didn't know what page I was on. And worse, she realized I might have stopped reading her book altogether. When I returned late Tuesday night, the lights were off. She was asleep, or pretending to be. I didn't check. Just dropped my bag, showered, and went to bed without saying a word. The next morning, she hovered near the coffee machine, waiting. I walked past her. Quiet. Steady. She looked up, expecting a question, a comment, something. I gave her nothing. It was the first time I saw confusion in her eyes. And that's when I knew it had begun. The silence wasn't absence. It was architecture. The scaffolding of distance, built with discipline. She had no idea how far I'd already gone. I didn't need to destroy him. I just needed gravity to do its work. His name was Chase. The man behind her late returns. The private jokes she wouldn't explain. The perfume she suddenly wore only on Wednesdays. I wasn't interested in him personally. I was interested in patterns. Connections. Weakness. And Chase had plenty. Startups always leave trails. A little pressure reveals the cracks. A few polite calls, a little data from public records, some archived posts from disgruntled interns, and the shape of his empire started to distort. It turned out Chase had taken shortcuts. Grant money that didn't match its paper trail. A fake advisory board listed on the website. A partner whose name he borrowed but never legally signed. All it took was a well-composed PDF, anonymous, of course, sent to a local journalist who had been sniffing around for months. I wasn't in the headline. I wasn't in the story. But I was in the timing. The article dropped on a Thursday morning, neutral in tone, concerning discrepancies and unverified partnerships. But I knew what those phrases meant to investors, and to clients, and to the kind of woman who liked her new man to be clean, ambitious, and risk-free. She read it. I could tell. She went silent that evening. No humming, no texting, just pacing. Slow, restless pacing through the kitchen. Alyssa sent me a message. Guess your boy's not untouchable after all. I didn't respond, because that wasn't the point. I didn't care about Chase's fall. I cared that she didn't know how it had started. I cared that for once, something was happening around her that she couldn't trace back to herself. No flirtation could fix it. No spin could redirect it. By the weekend, Chase had wiped his socials. His startup account posted a vague statement about restructuring. I watched her read it at the counter, her thumb trembling slightly as she scrolled. She bit her lip. For once, not in seduction, just uncertainty. She looked at me like she wanted to ask something. I didn't even raise my eyes. She had no idea she wasn't in control anymore. She had no idea the weight she felt wasn't hers to lift. It was falling, and I wasn't going to catch it. The first shift came at her sister's engagement dinner. A tight, curated evening with crystal glasses, speeches rehearsed to sound casual, and a 100-watt smile she wore like armor. She introduced me as usual. I nodded, shook hands, kept my distance. No need to perform anymore. The real performance was hers. She laughed louder than the joke required. Clung to me a beat too long when someone glanced over. Her sister noticed. Raised an eyebrow. I didn't say anything. Just kept sipping from my glass, watching her grasp for balance. The cracks were showing. When the conversation turned toward long-term relationships, her cousin joked, "You two are the veterans here. Tell us your secret." I looked up, slowly, held her gaze across the table, and smiled. "No secrets," I said. "Sometimes people just get used to pretending everything's fine." The silence hit harder than any outburst could have. Forks paused midair. Her sister blinked twice. A second later, the conversation pivoted, awkwardly, like a wheel slipping on ice. After dinner, I stepped outside to take a call. Didn't have one, of course. Just needed space. A few minutes later, Alyssa followed. "She's not doing well," she said quietly, lighting a cigarette. "You've changed." I said nothing. She exhaled. It's like watching someone try to swim in dry sand. I still didn't respond. Just walked back inside. The next week, it got colder. Her coworker, Jenna, unfollowed her on Instagram. Her posts suddenly had half the likes. She started asking if something seemed off between her and the people she used to vent to. They weren't ghosting her. They were retreating. Not from scandal, but from static. Because I hadn't exposed her. I didn't need to. I simply stopped protecting her image. When her father called to ask how we were doing, I passed the phone to her without a word. I heard his tone shift on the other end. Not accusing. Just disappointed. And disappointment leaves longer scars than anger ever could. That Sunday, I watched her prepare a charcuterie board for a brunch no one confirmed. She double-checked the champagne, adjusted the napkins, reapplied lipstick twice. Only one guest showed up. 15 minutes late. And even she left early. She sat at the table afterward, staring at untouched brie like it owed her answers. She was still smiling. But no one smiled back. By the time autumn crept in, she had started watching me more closely. Not affection, surveillance. Quiet attempts to measure the distance. I'd sit at the kitchen table reading, and she'd linger in the hallway just long enough to pretend she wasn't looking. She began asking questions she used to ignore. "What time will you be home? Did you sleep okay? Everything good between us?" Each one was a fishing line. And each time, I let the bait sink. Because the truth was, I was still there, physically. Same seat at the dinner table. Same spot on the couch. Same keys on the rack. But I wasn't in the room anymore. Not really. I was a ghost in plain sight. She'd tell stories from work. I'd nod at the right moments. She'd lean into me during movies. I wouldn't flinch, but I wouldn't lean back either. My body was still warm, but the warmth was directionless. It terrified her. Because it's one thing to argue. One thing to be caught. One thing to confess. But silence, real silence, is impossible to fix. You can't beg it. You can't seduce it. You can't explain it away. One night, she came home to find me sitting in the dark. No music. No TV. Just the glow of my phone. She asked if everything was okay. I said yeah. Nothing else. That was the first time she didn't push back. Because deep down, She already knew. The next morning, she made coffee for two again. She placed my cup exactly where I used to like it. I didn't touch it. She didn't ask why. That afternoon, she sent me a photo of us from 2 years ago. A beach trip. Her arms around my neck. Sunlit smile. The illusion of forever. Beneath it, "Do you ever miss this?" I didn't answer. Just stared at the image until it blurred. Because here's the truth. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just steps back, folds its arms, and watches. She began texting her sister more, staying longer in the shower, rearranging the bedroom like that could shift something in me. But it didn't, because she was looking for the man I used to be. And I was standing there, right in front of her, already gone. It happened on a Tuesday. The weather had turned. Gray skies, sharp wind, the kind that made you reconsider walking anywhere. She waited until dinner to start the conversation, as if timing could soften the blade. She lit candles, made pasta, set the table like we hadn't been circling silence for weeks. She even wore the sweater I once said I loved. It didn't work. The charm bounced off the walls like sound in an empty church. I sat across from her, fork idle in my hand. She started slow. "I've been thinking about us." I didn't interrupt. I know things feel different, and I know I've made mistakes. Still nothing from me. She kept going, words spilling out now, desperate, shaky, rehearsed. She talked about reconnection, about therapy, about how people go through phases. She talked about starting fresh. She asked if I'd consider it. I took a sip of water and said, "You already made your choice." That stopped her. She leaned forward, hands open. "But I'm here." I stayed. I finally met her eyes. "No," I said. "You came back. That's not the same." She tried to smile, but it cracked at the edges. "It was a mistake, what I said, what I did. But we can fix it. I'm willing to fight for us." I didn't move, didn't flinch, just let the silence stretch. Because she didn't want me. She wanted redemption, a reset button. But I wasn't angry anymore. And that's what unsettled her most. Anger can be managed. Anger means you still care. But I was done playing. She reached across the table. I leaned back. "I need to know if you're still in this," she whispered. I stood up, took my plate, walked it to the sink. Her voice cracked as I turned away. "You can't just walk out like this." But I already had. Weeks ago. Quietly. Strategically. And now she was just catching up. That night, she curled up on the couch, eyes puffy, scrolling old texts like archaeology. I passed by, grabbing a book. She didn't stop me. Just watched. Because deep down, she knew. This wasn't a cold spell. This was the end of the game. And I wasn't playing anymore. It was never about revenge. I didn't need to see her suffer. I just needed to see her alone with the truth. And it came quicker than I expected. Chase was gone. Completely. No calls, no texts, no explanations. One day she tried to open their shared photo album on her phone. It was empty. The next, his LinkedIn showed a new city, new job, no mention of her. She didn't cry. Not in front of me. But I noticed her staring at her own reflection more often. Fixing her hair when no one was around. Touching her face like she was searching for a version of herself she couldn't reach anymore. Her social feed dried up. The curated brunches, the flirtatious captions, the self-love posts, they stopped. So did the comments. So did the people. At work, they shifted her department. Not fired. Just moved. Quietly. Strategically. Someone else now led the meetings she used to control. Alyssa stopped dropping by. Jenna stopped replying. Even her sister began to sound distant, cautious, like she didn't want to get pulled into something already sinking. But me? I was fine. I had started going to the gym again. Reconnected with people I'd ghosted for years. Picked up woodworking, something I used to love before I spent my nights listening to someone explain how bored they were with stability. I was building a new life. One piece at a time. Quiet. Focused. And she was watching it all. One morning, I came back from a run and found her sitting at the kitchen island in silence. Hair unwashed. Sleeves pulled over her hands. She looked up, then down again. Not guilt. Not sorrow. Just defeat. Like she finally understood that the person sitting across from her wasn't angry. Wasn't bitter. Wasn't even heartbroken. He was gone. The hardest part of it all? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel powerful. I felt resolved. Like closing a book you outgrew years ago. She once told Alyssa, "He's convenient." And now, even her pain was inconvenient to me. Because I wasn't going to rescue her from the silence. That was her own to navigate. The final morning was quiet. No fight, no storm, just coffee brewing in a house that no longer felt shared. She stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the wind play with the trees, waiting, maybe, for something to be different. But nothing was. I had packed the night before, carefully, silently, just the essentials, left the keys on the dresser, removed my name from the lease 3 weeks prior, bank accounts separated, mail redirected, utilities reassigned. I'd erased myself with the precision of someone who'd already left long ago. She turned when I entered the room. I watched her eyes scan the duffel bag in my hand, then meet mine. There wasn't shock, just that hollow flicker of someone realizing the moment they'd feared had arrived without warning, and yet, not unexpectedly. She opened her mouth. I raised my hand. No words, because this wasn't her story anymore. She followed me to the door, barefoot, quiet. "I don't want it to end like this," she finally said, her voice trembling but soft. I paused, hand on the knob, turned halfway, met her eyes one last time, and said calmly, "I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected." Then I walked out. No hug, no last look, no cinematic pause, just the click of the door behind me, a sound that echoed longer than any argument we never had. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I didn't check my phone, didn't play music, just walked, one step at a time, away from the life that once held me in place like a paperweight. I didn't block her. I didn't erase the photos. I didn't need to. The past didn't deserve anger. It deserved absence. And as I disappeared from her world, I knew she'd hear that final silence louder than anything I could have ever said. Because some lessons don't come with closure. They come with an empty room, and the memory of a man who left without slamming the door, but made sure it would never open again. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.